The Void Gauntlet is out now, and I've been testing this a little bit on the PTR, and I've put together a rough 3 different builds for you to try with this fancy new weapon. So without further ado, let's go! Hey, this video was sponsored by my live streams here on YouTube. I stream every Wednesday, Australian night times, and at some random other times, so be sure to come by and check those out. Now let's get into the video. We will start off with this Void Healer build using the Void Gauntlet and the Life Staff. And I think for the most part, this is probably going to be one of the most common builds we will see with the Void Gauntlet because of how the Void Gauntlet scales with focus, even though it is secondarily. It's the only other weapon with the Life Staff that scales with focus, so they have a really good pairing together. This is a healer build using both of these weapons, and the Life Staff in this build is primarily used to put heal over time effects like Sacred Ground and Orbs of Protection and Beacon onto your allies, and then use the Void Gauntlet for all of your other juicy effects that you can get from the support line with the Void Gauntlet. Our attributes for this build is 250 focus, 50 intelligence, and 50 constitution. You can probably mix and match these a little bit, but your focus should be the main priority, and then put the rest points into intelligence and constitution. It's just hard to get like exact stats on the PTR because you can only have a certain amount of specific gear. You can't really play around with it too much. For our Life Staff weapon masteries, we're rocking the typical builds with the Sacred Ground, the Orb of Protection, and Beacon. We don't need to touch on this too much, but most of these effects are heal over time or apply fortify or a general like healing buffs to an area on the ground or something like that, and then you can switch to the Void Gauntlet to do all of your other juicy effects, which is what they're focusing primarily on for this build. The first ability for our Void Gauntlet is the Baneful Tether, which fires a projectile at the target and it tethers you to them, weakening the target and empowering you for up to 10 seconds. This will have additional effects as you level this up, including Soul Eater if you get the last passive, which will give you health back once you do actually kill the target. Now, it's worth noting that this ability will disappear if you switch back to the Life Staff, so make sure you're only using this if you're going to stay on with the Void Gauntlet. The next ability is Orb of Decay, which will deal damage to the target as it travels towards them. Once it reaches its maximum distance, it will heal everything as it comes back to you. This is a good ability to use that you can get damage out as well as get some healing in. It will also generate you some mana, which is super valuable for this build as both of our weapons do use up our mana. And the last ability is Essence Rupture, and this just applies a stack to whatever target you hit, and every time one of your allies hits that target, they get some health back. So you want to apply this to whatever the main enemy is that your team are fighting, whether it's a boss or whatever it may be, apply it to them, they'll get some health back from that effect. It's also worth noting about the Glimpse of the Void, which is the final passive that you get in the decay line for the Void Gauntlet. With this ability, gain a stack of Void Essence per successful ability hit, up to 4 stacks. Once you get 4 stacks, you have to use a heavy attack and it will reset all of your Void Gauntlet's cooldowns to 0. So it will reset everything. You can only do this every 15 seconds, but you want to pay attention to that little indicator above your health. Once that hits 4, you want to do a heavy attack with the Void Gauntlet. It'll reset all of your cooldowns and you can just go again. Your armor for this build is obviously going to be focus gear, but it's also worth noting that we're wearing light armor here because of the additional effects you now get for wearing light armor as a healer build. You get extra healing output, as well as you get a little bit for medium, but because we're just strictly focused on healing, we're going light armor here. You're probably going to be in range for the most part as well. You could also put a focus gem into your Void Gauntlet to increase your focus stacking with the Void Gauntlet. It's an option that you can do as well. Our next build is called the Dark Duelist, and this is a Void Gauntlet and Rapier build. These go well together because they both have intelligence stacking, and you can use the Rapier as like a distance closer and for some quick hits if you do need to in combat, but you've got abilities that you can close the distance with quickly, and then you can use the Void Gauntlet's melee abilities like the Void Blade to actually swing away and use the self-heal abilities to kind of sustain yourself through a lot of those combat encounters. We'll start with the attributes, and this is primarily going to be an intelligence build, so you want to maximize that and then put the remaining points into focus and constitution. For armor, we are wearing medium intelligence gear here. You would probably want to maximize your constitution in this build, and we're wearing medium armor because this is going to be a melee focused build, so you will take some general hits, especially if you are PvPing with this build, so it's good to keep that in mind. We'll start out with the Rapier for your weapon abilities, and we're using Flurry. You want to maximize Flurry as much as possible. Flurry does a ton of damage with those 5 quick thrust attacks. You can use this to finish off targets. You can use it at the start of fights to get in some really quick damage. We're also using Repost for PvP specifically, which is puts you in a defensive stance for 1 second. You can then, if you take damage, you then counter that attack and makes you invulnerable for a little bit of time. It also gives you some little bit of stamina back and some other effects if you do maximize its abilities. And the last ability is Fletch, and what that will do is lunge you forward into like this spinning cone. It will damage things in front of you, but that's our main movement ability. If you are just playing PvP and you want a bit more flexibility, you could go something like Evade so you can move a bit faster, or even go Tondo just for the bleed effects. For the Void Gauntlet, we are focusing on the Annihilation line, but we're only picking up 2 abilities in Annihilation. The main being Void Blade, which is going to be your primary damage dealing ability. You want to level this up as quickly as possible. We are combining it with the Petrifying Scream, which will root targets in front of you, disabling their movement so they can't move. It also will give you Fortify once you pick up the Fortifying Echoes, so you can take some of those hits when they are coming towards you. And our last ability is going to be Baneful Tether. Now, I've gone Baneful Tether rather than Oblivion because Oblivion gives you Empower for only 6 seconds, and it does 30% weapon damage for that time as well. Whereas Baneful Tether gives you Empower for 10 seconds, and it also weakens the target, so you will be doing more damage to them as well. So it's an extra period of time that it does last. I feel like this works out better because we are going to be using the Void Gauntlet primarily, so it doesn't matter if the Tether gets knocked off if we switch weapons, because we're probably not going to be switching weapons, and the Empower lasts for longer, so that makes it more valuable. We're also using Void Caller, which is the last ability down in the Annihilation line. So on successful ability hits, you gain a stack of Void Essence. At 6 stacks, it consumes all of the stacks and it heals you and friendlies for 30% weapon damage. It does stack with focus because it is a heal, so we want to have a little bit of focus. That's why we've got some focus in our attributes, but this will keep you sustained and alive during most of the fights. You will get some health back from the Void Blade. Once you get Leeching Blade, the last effect, you get a little bit of health back, and you also get some health back from applying critical hits with the Annihilation passives as well. So realistically, you're going to be healing a lot with this build as long as you can keep swinging away with the Void Blade. And the last build is the Gauntlet Wizard. This is using the Ice Gauntlet and the Void Gauntlet. We are primarily a ranged build here using both of these gauntlets. It would be sick if you could dual wield them, but we're really using the CC from the Ice Gauntlet and then the self-heal and sustain and damage that comes through from the Void Gauntlet. So I think they match well together in that respect. Attributes first, intelligence primarily because both the Ice Gauntlet and Void Gauntlet stack with intelligence. A little bit of focus for the same reasons with the Rapier, and then constitution is less important for this build because you're primarily going to be ranged. You can do a little bit of melee damage, but you will probably find the balance there. For our weapon abilities in your Ice Gauntlet, you're going to want Ice Storm because it's a huge AoE. It will root targets in place. It deals damage over time. You can also get increased damage by standing in it. It's a really valuable ability for the Ice Gauntlet. And we're going to use Ice Shower to try and root people in place, keep them away from you. You also apply Rend once you get the Frigid Showers. The last ability, I toyed around with Ice Spikes and possibly Ice Pylon, but I think the value you get from Entombed, which puts you in a tomb, makes you invulnerable, gives you mana back, is just overweighed by that, especially if you're using this build in PvP, because you just get that invulnerability from it and you get mana back. And the Void Gauntlet does consume mana very aggressively. And by the way, if you right click when you haven't got the blade active, you will drain your health and replenish your mana. So it's a good way to use this build, I think, with the Entombed. It just helps balance the aggressiveness of the build. For the Void Gauntlet, we are using the same abilities as our Rapier build, so I don't want to cover them again because we already just did that. However, it's worth noting here that you could drop the Void Blade and pick up something like Orb of Decay so that you can stay at range, still dealing a little bit of damage, getting that health back so that you don't have to go into the melee range. But Void Blade is just such a valuable skill for the Void Gauntlet in that you get all that health back and all that damage that you can quickly do by applying this effect. And then plus with having Void Caller, you just get that self-sustain. So when you do actually get into melee range with something, you can just Ice Storm the ground and then Void Blade and smash away at them. So you get a really good amount of damage there. And armor we missed, but for armor for this build, probably medium armor because there's a little bit of light damage and obviously intelligence gear, but you could go into light if you want to stay completely away from enemies and just get that little bit of extra damage you get for being in light armor. And that are the 3 builds to try, guys. Let me know in the comments down below which one of these builds you like the best, which Void Gauntlet build you like or have been playing around with. I'm really interested to see how this weapon develops in the game. Check out my endgame content guide, which goes through all of the endgame content and watermarking and explains it all for you. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.